أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. We are gathered here tonight to honor the birth of Lady Zainab alayhi salam, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib and the daughter of Lady Fatima, the supreme lady of the worlds. What I want to discuss inshallah in the time that I have is what factors contributed to the formation of the character of Lady Zainab. Now, Lady Zainab, when we say Zainab, we remember that she is an icon of patience, of resilience, of resistance, a model of jihad. A narration that we have says that أفضل الجهاد, the best form of jihad, كلمة حق أمام سلطان جائر. The best form of jihad is a word of truth that is said confronting a tyrant. You understand that Zainab alayhi salam and Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam and all our imams were mujahids actually. Because some people, for some reason, they think that Rasulullah performed jihad, Imam Ali performed jihad, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein. But after Imam Hussein, we forget. We think that our imams were qa'ideen, were sitting back. We forget that they were actually doing jihad, because jihad is not only the armed struggle. What Lady Zainab did was jihad. She's an icon of jihad. Okay, so what really contributed to forming this kind of character? I'll mention a few factors. Obviously, we could think about many, maybe. But I'll present a few I could think of. The first factor is the natural factor, the biological factor, genetics. A contributing factor. It's not the only factor, it's a contributing factor. What we inherit from our parents. We do inherit traits from our parents to some extent, right? And science agrees that actually there are traits that we inherit from our mothers and our fathers. And this inheritance is a complex kind of phenomenon whereby thousands of people are involved in the traits that you end up inheriting or carrying. Right? So, for example, for you to exist, it required your mother and your father. For your mother to exist, it required her mother and her father. For your father to exist, it required his mother and his father, right? So now we have how many people were required to meet so that you are born? How many? 6. Thank you very much. MashaAllah, mathematics, skills, sister. 6 people, right? So we went just one generation up, okay? If we go one more generation up, how many people are added now? Yes? 10 more or 10 total? 4 more, are you sure? Because we already are at 4. Your grandmother, your grandfather from your father's side, your grandmother, your grandfather from your mother's side. And they also have, each has a mother and a father. So how many now? Maths, come on, mashallah, salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Mathematicians tonight. So we have 8 plus 6, now 14, okay? Now we went 2 generations up, okay? If we go 10 generations up, that's how many people? It's a complex formula, this one. Yes, it's a numerical sequence. Yeah, so it's a summation of 2 power n until like from 1 to 10. So that is over 2,000 people. So over 2,000 people have a certain level of influence on your genetics. If we go 10 more generations, it's like 20 generations now. Do you know how many people had to marry and give birth to a child so that you are born eventually? 20 generations. Do you know how many? Give a number, like, just guess. Huh? Pardon? 100,000 more. Over 2 million. Over 2 million people. Okay, so over 1 million couples had to meet so that you are born. Yeah, inheritance is a complex kind of process, right? But obviously, the direct influence, or let's say the traits that have the kind of the most or the greatest influence on you, are usually the ones that you inherit from your first generation, your parents, your direct parents, right? Your grandparents, maybe to 2, 3, 4, 5 generations maximum, because then the higher you go, it would dilute, basically. Why? Because you inherit, let's say, genetically, yes, almost roughly 50% of your genes come from your mother, 50% from your father. And each got 50% of theirs from their mother and father. So that means quarter of what you've inherited is from your paternal grandmother, quarter is from your paternal grandfather, quarter is from your maternal grandmother, quarter is from your maternal grandfather. Tongue twisters. Right? So, but the higher you go up, the less kind of an effect that generation would have on you. Basically, we also read in some traditions, we hear this story that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he wanted to marry someone, a report said that he would ask his brother Aqil. And Aqil was someone who was an expert in genetics. He was a kind of a nasaba maybe, an expert in the lineage or the ancestry of the Arabs. And Imam Ali would ask Aqil, find me a woman, I would like to marry a woman who comes from a tribe of Arabs that are rough, because I want a child who would be tough, right? A tough kind of tribe. So there was this kind of understanding as well. The Holy Messenger of God also, there is a narration that said, that suggests that he said, تَخَيَّرُوا لِنُطَفِكُمْ فَإِنَّ الْعِرْقَ دَسَّاسٌ. Right? Beware who you marry, because you need to think about what traits you're passing to your children. These kind of things we need also to pay attention to. So we go to the ziyarah or ziyarat warith when we address Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. We say, أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. Has anyone looked up the translation of that? I bear witness, O Imam, that you were light in the sublime loins and in the purified wombs that were passed through generations until this was placed, until this was decided that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam be born generation after generation after generation. We say in this ziyarah, O Imam, you were passed on through purified wombs and sublime loins. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها. The ignorance or the impurities of the ignorance era did not object you to filth. This is kind of purified ancestry that the Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had. What is very interesting is that these same sublime loins and same purified wombs that brought to this world Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein, Sayyida Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, those same sublime loins and same purified wombs brought Lady Zainab to this existence. This was the ancestry of Lady Zainab alayhi salam. Who was her grandfather? From her mother's side, the Holy Messenger of God, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The role model of morals and ethics. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. That man. Who was her grandmother from her mother's side? Lady Khadija alayhi salam. The lady who supported Rasulullah in the most difficult of times, who stood by Rasulullah, was loyal to the Messenger of God. The lady who was of the Sayyidatun Nisa, of the great ladies of the world. That's her grandmother. Who was her grandfather from the father's side? Abu Talib alayhi salam. Abu Talib, the one who supported the Messenger of God in the most difficult of times as well. Now you see Zainab and her patience. Who was her grandmother from her father's side? Fatima bint Asad. Who was the father of Lady Zainab alayhi salam? Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali bin Abi Talib, the nafs, the equal the peer of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who was her mother? Lady Fatima alayhi salam, the soul of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the ancestry of Lady Zainab alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها. We believe that the Messenger of God, his ancestors, his fathers and forefathers and great-grandfathers, they were purified from any shirk, from any association of any partner with God. They were believers. The same with the fathers of Amirul Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam, their ancestors. This is one factor. This is one factor that contributes to some of the traits that one might have. The temperament that you might have, there is some level of inheritance that you might be inheriting from your parents, from your ancestry. It might affect, the way you behave to some extent. It might affect, your, psychology to some extent, maybe, and so on. And this is studied in the right fields. So this is one factor, the nature. The nature. The second factor is what? So we always talk about what? Nature versus nurture. Yes, the nurture, obviously. The nurture, the upbringing. This child that grows up in a certain house, in a certain family, what are they hearing? What are they learning? Right? The verbal instructions that we give them. When we tell our children, this is right, this is wrong, this is good to do, don't do that, be careful of this. That's very important. The verbal direction we give them. It influences their character. But the thing that has even a greater influence is what? Is it the words that we say? Or is it the actions that we do, the behaviors that we display before them? Because they're probably far more influenced by what they see than what they hear. Someone once said that, if you want to know that, or if you observe in a certain village or a city, people who are believers, who are people of, faith, then know that necessarily there is someone with them. There is a source of knowledge with them. There is a alim, there's a person of knowledge with them. Even if this person was silent, just their presence there is influential, is radiant, radiates their behavior, his or her behavior, influences. So we go to Lady Zainab alayhi salam and we ask, okay, Lady Zainab, where did she grow up? What did she see in her house that might have influenced her character? That's a very natural question to ask. What did she see in the house? We remember from our reports, and we see that a narration attributed to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, our second Imam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He was a little child, 6, 7, 8 years old. And he reported, he would say, رأيت أمي فاطمة عليها السلام قامت في محرابها ليلة جمعتها. I observed my mother Fatima. She would be standing on her prayer mat, in her prayer place, in the mihrab, the place of worship that she has, on the night of Jumu'ah, on the night of Friday. When is the night of Friday? Thursday night, yes? Yes? Because the Islamic day, when does the Islamic day start? Does it start at midnight? Yes. After Maghrib, excellent. Of what day? Is it of the day or the day before or the day after? The day before, excellent. Yes, so the Islamic day starts at Maghrib, at sunset of the day before, not at midnight, and finishes at midnight. When does the day finish? Pardon? Maghrib, yes? So starts from sunset of the previous day, finishes at sunset of the same day. Okay? So Laylatul Jum'ah is what? Is the night that comes before the Friday day. And Friday is a great day in our traditions. It is sufficient for you to go and see what has been reported about the greatness of that day, how important it is to spend our time on that day with remembrance of God. فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. When the time of prayers is called, then seek what? Then rush to the remembrance of God and leave the trade and the matters of the dunya, matters of the worldly affairs, and go and rush to remember God. And then when you finish, disperse and seek God's provision. Yeah? Friday is a great day. You see also narrations that, at the time of sunset of Friday, It's a very great hour. Turn to God with dua. There are some du'as, supplications that are recommended. But if you don't have any book at hand or any app or any text to read, just turn with your heart to God and pray to God. Ask. A great day. Imam Sadiq would say also about the night of Jumu'ah as what? Laylatul Jumu'ah kayawmiha. The night of Friday, like the Friday in greatness. So also, we should try to spend the night in remembrance of God, in worship, in salat. Obviously, one might say it's very difficult these days. Lady Fatima here is reviving the whole night. Imam al-Hasan would say in the report, فَلَمْ تَزَلْ رَاكِعَةً سَاجِدَةً حَتَّى اتَّضَحَ عَمُودُ الصُّبْحِ. She would not cease to prostrate and do sujood and do ruku' and bow before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until what? Until dawn. Until morning, actually. Until the dawn broke. And notice here that Imam al-Hasan is awake too. Apparently. So possibly Lady Fatima was probably training her children as well not to sleep on that night, to spend it rather in acts that would bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Possibly. Obviously it's very difficult in our times, especially, someone might say, the other day I was speaking to someone and they said, well, in Arabia the time was more regular. Fajr is more regular, it's like 5:30, it doesn't really swing, but in here, it's like between, 2:30 and 7, it swings really, it's tough. So it's very difficult to do anything. But there's a saying in Arabic that says, مَا لَا يُتْرَكْ كُلُّهُ مَا لَا يُدْرَكْ كُلُّهُ لَا يُتْرَكْ كُلُّهُ. If you can't accomplish something completely, then don't leave it completely. Do something. Thursday night, or the night of the Friday, Laylatul Jumu'ah, try to do something. Try to show your children that yes, it is important to come to the center to recite Dua Kumail. Let them see it. You might preach it day and night. Dua Kumail is important. Laylatul Jumu'ah is a blessed night. You should do this. You should read the Quran. But you don't do any. You probably sleep and they hear you snore. Is that really influential? Like, what kind of children are you building when you say something and you do something else? Right? Show it to them. That's one thing that is very influential. So imagine your children, instead of seeing you like Lady Zainab and Imam al-Hasan, Imam Hussein would see Lady Fatima spending the night in worship before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine, for example, my children see me sleeping the whole night. Or maybe spending the night, watching movies, or doing things, or saying things that don't please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or engaging in gossip, talking about this person, that person. Instead of having the opportunity to spend it with something that is useful. Maybe not worshipping, maybe not salat and reciting Quran and dua. Maybe reading a book. Maybe listening to a lecture. Improving your knowledge. Improve your knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about the universe, about the creation of God. Any science that you study today. It's a form of appreciation of what Allah has created in this world. Isn't it? So if you read any book with the intention that, oh God, I want to actually reach you. Isn't this an act of worship? Isn't this something that gets you closer to God? That makes you mindful of God? Didn't Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and the Holy Messenger of God, didn't they say, and the Messenger of God himself would say, that the remembrance of God often is not necessarily to say Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. The Prophet would continue, he would say that means that at any time you realize that God is present and you would not sin, you would not disobey God. This is the remembrance of God often. اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا. Allah tells us in the Quran, O believers, O you who believe, remember God often, remember God abundantly. The Prophet would say, yes, not necessarily to say Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, it's important, you should actually. We should do this verbal remembrance. Amir al-Mu'mineen would say what in Dua Kumail? وَجْعَلْ لِسَانِي بِذِكْرِكَ لَهِجَةً. Oh God, make my tongue never cease remembering you, mentioning you. So we need to remember God with the tongue. But that's not the actual constant remembrance or abundant remembrance of God. When my lips twitch but my heart is absent, what kind of remembrance is this? So spend the Thursday night or the night of the Friday or Laylatul Jumu'ah, spend it in something that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Don't push yourself too hard. so that the next day you actually wake up for Salatul Subh, right? Sometimes some people feel like, oh my God, I can do Salatul Layl, I can engage in worship now, right? And then later, the next day you realize, oh my God, could that have been shaitan that actually was pushing me so hard to stay awake whole night until midnight and then sleep and never wake up for Salatul Subh? So I sacrificed something that God demanded from me for something that I feel I wanted to do as a voluntary act. And then you probably missed both. Allah knows. So be reasonable about it. That's what I want to say, right? Be reasonable about it. Spend a few minutes. You can do half an hour, spend half an hour reciting dua, reading Surah Yasin. Do something on the night to seize the opportunity, essentially. So, your words, your actions, these are things that are actually forming your child's character. Your words, the words that you say, the actions that you do, the way they see you behave, they're registering it, they're learning it. You could say, oh son, say Bismillah before you eat. Did you say Bismillah before you eat? If you didn't, that's bad. But you don't say Bismillah. No, when they see you say Bismillah, before, not just before eating, before every action that you do, then they realize that God is someone important. God is something important. God is present everywhere. I need to make sure that God is pleased with me before I do anything and everything. They realize the position of God in our hearts. They realize the position of God in our lives. And that sticks with them. Beyond just saying Bismillah before you eat. Then they live their lives for the sake of God. In the name of God I eat, it becomes in the name of God I wake up, in the name of God I spend my day, in the name of God I sleep, in the name of God I eat, in the name of God I have fun, in the name of God I recite Quran, in the name of God I do salat, in the name of God I live my life. Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. My prayers, my acts of worship are for God, yes, but what as well? My life and my death are for God. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen does he not say in Dua Kumayl, حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. Oh God, make me live in such a way that what? All my life is in service to you. Every single moment I live is a moment that I actually feel the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This means you're remembering God. You're in a state of worship. And that state would deter you from any disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So show it to your children. Say Bismillah before you eat. Say Alhamdulillah when you eat. Show them that you really feel the blessing of God, that you're actually having food, that so many millions of people are probably deprived of that blessing. Teach your children to be grateful by you yourself being grateful. Teach your children how important Quran is in our lives, that it is actually the constitution of our lives, by actually showing them that the first thing I do is I recite Quran when I wake up. Or the last thing I do before I sleep is to recite half a page of the Quran. Show them. Show them. Obviously, don't force them. Don't force them. It's not by force. Right? It's not by force. It's not by coercion. It's not by violence. Make them love the worship of Allah. Make them love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a report and a narration, it is reported that he said to Prophet Musa, Ya Musa, habbib ilayya khalqi, wa habbib khalqi ilay. O Musa, make me loved to my servants. Loved, love, love. If you see the narrations or our traditions, how much they talk about love. It's amazing. It's amazing. وحببني إلى خلقي وحبب خلقي إلي. حبب. Make my servants loved, beloved to me, and make me beloved to them. That doesn't happen by coercion. That doesn't happen by force. Possibly it is sufficient that they see you how you behave. They see you how faith really, how much it really means to you. Does it really mean to you like you say or like you claim? How did the behavior of Lady Fatima influence Lady Zainab alayhi salam? A narration attributed to Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. She said about Lady Zainab, so now fast forward 50 years. Now we were at the scene of what? Lady Fatima. spending the Thursday night, Laylatul Jumu'ah, in worship, bowing, prostrating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until dawn. Fast forward 50 years, 55 years. Fatima bint al-Hussein, she narrates, she would say, وَأَمَّا عَمَّتِي زَيْنَبْ عَلَيْهَا السَّلَامُ فَإِنَّهَا لَمْ تَزَلْ قَائِمَةً فِي تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَةِ. She says, as for my auntie Zainab, she would not stop standing on that night. She meant the night of the 10th of Muharram. We all know what that means. We all know what the 10th of Muharram, what the night of the 10th of Muharram means. That was the night before the 10th of Muharram. That was the last night that Zainab would be seeing her brothers and nephews and the companions of Hussein. Zainab, on that night, she would not cease to stand that night in her prayer niche, تستغيث ربها, calling out to her Lord. And her eyes did not rest, nor did her groaning cease. Another narration that on the day of Ashura, the next day, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, when he would bid farewell to Zainab, to his sister, what did he say to her? He said in his last farewell to her, he said, Ya ukhtah la tansini min nafilatil layl. O sister, do not forget me in Salatul Layl from your du'as. Further, that night, the 11th night, and we all know what the 11th night means. We all know what happened on the 10th day and what state Zainab was in on the 11th night. Still, Imam Zain al-Abidin would say about Lady Zainab, رأيتها تلك الليلة تصلي من جلوس. I saw her that night praying, but while sitting, because the calamities took whatever left of energy from her legs and knees. But she was still praying. She was still doing that prayer at night. She was still conversing with God. She didn't say, well, I lost my brother, I lost my nephews. I've seen what I've seen. Let me rest for one night. Apparently she didn't. Imam Sajjad also in another narration, he would say, my auntie Zainab, with all these calamities and trials that befell her, on our way to Damascus, she would not abandon her nightly voluntary prayer, Salatul Layl. She would not abandon it. She was taken as captive, forced to walk miles and miles and miles in the deserts. She wouldn't leave. Salatul Layl. When did that start? That started 55 years back. That started 55 years ago with Lady Fatima alayhi salam doing this. Imam Sajjad in another narration, he would also say that my auntie Zainab, when we were traveling, because they traveled from Karbala to Kufa and from Kufa to Damascus, they were made to walk and do that very long travel. He would say while we're traveling, at the time of prayer, she would pray while standing. But when we arrive at some stations, because there were some kind of stations where they would stop and take some break, she would pray while sitting. Imam Zain al-Abidin, he says that I went and asked Auntie Zainab, and I said, Auntie Zainab, why are you doing this? Why are you praying while sitting? And she would say, I pray the voluntary prayers, the mustahab prayers, while sitting due to the severe hunger and weakness. And that is because for 3 nights I have been distributing the food they give me to the children. And the people, they're not giving each of us except 1 piece of bread for a day and a night. So I'm giving my share for the children, for those who need it. When did this start? That started From that report that Lady Fatima alayhi salam, Imam al-Hasan would describe Lady Fatima, that Lady Fatima would actually pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the neighbors. And Imam al-Hasan would ask her, the little child would ask his mother, "Oh mother, I heard you pray for people around you, but never for yourself." And she would say what? Al-jar thumma ad-dar. Oh son, we think of the others first, and we come later. That was manifested 55 years later with Zainab alayhi salam. What Zainab displayed started 50 years before in the house. In the house of وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. That's where the sacrifices started, in that house. Where everything that they had, these people who were fasting, everything they would be having on the day that they would be breaking the fast, they didn't have a feast. And therefore they gave a feast to people, and therefore Allah wanted to reward the Ahlul Bayt for the great feast they gave away. No. They had a loaf of bread, but that's all they had. They gave all they had to the poor person, and the next day to the orphan, and the next day to the captive. That's where that started, in that house. Zainab salamullahi alayha, when she would be standing up with all courage, speaking up a word of truth, where did she learn that? Did she not learn it from Lady Fatima alayhi salam, who said, or who gave that sermon in the masjid, in the mosque of Rasulullah in Medina, speaking a word of truth, defending the rights of herself and of Amirul Mu'mineen? That's courage. That's courage. These are the ladies of Islam. This is what Islam makes of ladies. That's courage. So yes, do encourage your children to worship Allah, love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try to create a certain environment at your home, environment of worship. When it is time for prayer, lead your family in prayer. Pray jama'ah. Why are you praying each separately? Pray jama'ah. That's one practice that you can do. You can make your children understand the greatness of Salatul Jama'ah. Sometimes people forget. If there is a certain congregational prayers that is taking place somewhere, maybe around the corner, ya akhi, maybe you have to drive for 10 minutes. People belittle the greatness of actually driving there and taking a break and going there, even walking there to join the congregational prayers. If you see the reports, the narrations, how great an act this is. Teach it to your children, teach it to your family by actually making sure that in the house, no one prays furada, no one prays individually. You pray together. Pray together. Teach your children the love for Ahlul Bayt, the attachment to the Messenger of God and his family. Take them to Umrah. Take them to Ziyarah. Save money. Let them save money so that they go to the Ziyarah or Umrah. On the day of the birth anniversary of the Imams, do something nice that they like, that they love. Make it a beautiful day so that they love Amirul Mu'mineen. They love the 13th of Rajab. They love Yawmul Ghadir. Because it gives them really beautiful memories, nice memories. This is how you also teach them to love Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is one way. This is one way. Buy them books that are relevant, that are entertaining, yes, but they're also educational on the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. What we're doing now is also called Ihya'ul Amr. We're reviving the cause and the memory of Ahlul Bayt, yes? That's what we do. That's why we are attending here. Because we want to show that we love these people. We attend these events. Otherwise, we could be, sitting at home, comfortably watching something or whatever. But we make the effort to come here. Why? Why did any of you come here tonight? Honestly. I tell you, because there's one thing that unifies all of us here. And that's the love. Love. That's the love for everything that these people represent. All the values, all the beautiful values that we find in those people. We love them for what they were, for what they are. That's what brought us here. This is one thing that unifies us now. So, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Teach your children also to support causes. You can talk to them about Palestine, about supporting the oppressed people for nights and days and hours, but they don't see you sacrificing something. They don't see you maybe donating, some of the clothes that you bought recently that are still fresh and new. Not that you want to recycle. right? Something that means something to you. They haven't seen you sacrificing it for the sake of any cause that you're preaching for. Why would they believe you? Why would they be influenced? One act sometimes that you make, it can educate them. It can form their character. It can form who they are for years and generations to come, actually. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, chapter 66, verse 6, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. O you who believe, protect your families, protect yourselves and your families. We have a responsibility. We're all responsible for what? Just like we try to protect our families from the cold in the winter, from the heat in the summer, from any insecurity, that's an obligation everyone feels. A similar obligation is that you protect them also from what? Allah says, naran, from a hellfire, from a fire. Make sure you educate your family, your children. It's like you are seeing members of your family maybe walking somewhere that's dangerous. At least you would try to warn them. Sometimes you would try to, force them not to walk that way because you love them so much. Do we have that concern for each other? So these are the factors that I mentioned so far, 2 factors. One is the nature. The other is the nurture. These are things that form, or factors that form the character of individuals. And these are also factors that form the character of Lady Zainab alayhi salam. Obviously another factor is what? The environment. Inshallah, I'll finish with this. The environment. Where did we grow up? Who were our friends? Who did we hear from? The narration says, man asgha ila abdin kama or kana or kaman qad abada. If you listen to someone, it is as if you worship them. It is as if basically you're obeying them. If you listen to them. Meaning that you will be influenced by things you hear. Maybe you disagree, but you will be influenced. It is there now, it's in your system. It's in your system. When you see something, it's already in your system, it's past the filter. It passed the filter. This is why it's very important. In Islam, there's much emphasis on what? Don't listen to the haram. Don't look at the haram. Why do you think this is, by the way? Because once these haram things pass the filter, they're in your system. They will float someday in your system. Even if you disagree, even if you think this is very evil, but you heard it, you saw things. It'll be hard to purify yourself again, and let them be out of your system. They're in your memory. Allah bless those who have weak memories. But they're in your memory now. So it's very important to understand what environment we're bringing our children in. What are they learning? What are they listening to? Ourselves as well. What are we watching? What are we listening to? Ahyu amrana rahimallah man ahya amrana. Imam Rida, when he was asked, Imam Rida would say in a narration, revive our cause. May Allah's mercy be upon the person who revives our cause. His companion Abu Salt al-Harawi, he would ask, O Imam, how do we revive your cause? He would say, يَتَعَلَّمُ عُلُومَنَا وَيُعَلِّمُهَا النَّاسِ. He would learn, or she would learn from our knowledge, and they would teach it to the people. So learn from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Learn from the true fountain of knowledge. Get your knowledge from there. وَيُعَلِّمُهَا النَّاسِ. And teach it. And nas, teach it to the people, not to the believers. Teach it to the people. This is one way you revive the cause of Ahlul Bayt. This is how you revive their cause. So make sure where you're learning, what you're learning, where you're learning from. That's very important. So we come to Lady Zainab alayhi salam. I'll finish with this. Who did she learn from? She spent 5 years with the Messenger of God, 5 years around Lady Fatima alayhi salam. She heard from them. She reported from them. You know the khutbah fadakiyya, the sermon that Lady Fatima delivered in the mosque of the Messenger of God, known as the Fadakiyya sermon. One of the reports, chain of reports, ends with Lady Zainab alayhi salam. A child remembered khutbah Fadakiyya and reported it. She would narrate from Amir al-Mu'mineen. She lived with Amir al-Mu'mineen around 35 years, listening to these beautiful balagha, listening to the eloquence of Ali. She lived with Hassan alayhi salam 44 years almost. She lived with Hussein alayhi salam almost 55 years. This was the surrounding of Lady Zainab alayhi salam. So obviously, all these factors would combine and give us that beautiful fruit, the icon of patience, the icon of resilience, and the icon of resistance, and the icon of jihad. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that He may help us walk the footsteps of Lady Zainab and leave this world on the footsteps of Lady Zainab alayha salam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salawat.
We have a few minutes if there are any questions from inside.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. I just have a question about, you started with a really interesting sort of description of genetics, and then you talked about how Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, her amazing genetics was part of her greatness in some way. And I just wanted to think about that at a more sort of abstract level. Is Sayyidah Zainab great because of her genetics in part, or because of who her parents or grandparents were? And if so, then what does that say for us or others who don't have that same sort of purity of genetic line? I mean, is there another reason, or is that part of it?
The answer is no to the first question, obviously. I hope I made that clear. No, it's not the factor that made Zainab what she was. It is one of the factors. In fact, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created us different. And He wanted it so. He wanted it as such, right? Meaning that there are some certain set of skills that I have, strengths that I have in my character that you don't have. There are other strengths that you have, but I don't have. And this is because of both factors of nature and nurture, right? When we talk about nature, for example, I come from a place, maybe the weather where my ancestors lived in, the geography where I grew up in, the experiences that I have faced, things that played a factor. They shaped a certain level of temperament that I have. It doesn't mean that I'm better than you, nor does it mean that you are better than I. Allah clearly clarified it in the Quran. When you want to rank people, you would not be able to, Allah knows. But you do it by taqwa. By taqwa. Inna akramakum inda Allah atqakum. When you want to say that this person is better than that person or that, it's taqwa. There's nothing related to race or genetics or all that, right? These can play factors in shaping the differences that we all have, right? You are someone, for example, you might have a certain level of courage, more than I have, right? But I might have a certain level of maybe memory, stronger memory than you have, right? There is the factor of nurture and nature, they play together in this. Not one and not the other, by the way, right? But if you want to say who's better than the other, it's about basically how you utilize this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards, by the way, by the level of difficulty that you face. For example, I am someone, maybe by the nature of my ancestors, hypothetically, okay, that we are able to wake up at night and do Salatul Layl easily. Of course, with some nurture, with some upbringing, it can be kind of fortified. But maybe your lineage don't have that, find it difficult, assuming, okay, hypothetically. But then we both wake up for Salatul Layl. Okay? I find it very easy. It's very easy for me. But you find it very difficult. Yet you wake up and we perform the same prayer. Guess who's greater in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The one who suffers more. The one who goes through more hardship. That's not me saying. That's the hadith that says, أَفْضَلُ الْأَعْمَالِ أَحْمَزُهَا. The most or the greatest of the acts are what? The ones that you do with greater hardship. Right? So that's what I want to emphasize. The reason that, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He created this world is that we all are different. And we have to accept it. You have traits that you're born with that I don't have. I have traits that I'm born with that you don't have. But it doesn't mean that all I have is weakness and all you have is strength. It's a variation. And Allah made this world in such a way so that the world operates. Eventually, you will have things that I don't have. I will have things that you don't have. You will come to me needing what I have. I will come to you needing what you have. And this is how the cycle of economy works, for example. Okay? An example, yes? I hope that made it a bit clearer.
Any final questions? Otherwise, we will end there. Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.